You have an employee who's struggling. They're missing deadlines, they seem withdrawn in meetings, they ask way too many questions. So you put them on a performance improvement plan. You document everything, you have really tough conversations, and nothing changes. Or it gets worse. What if I told you the problem isn't their performance? What if the issue is their nervous system is stuck in survival mode and every single thing you are doing to fix it is making it worse? If you're a leader who's frustrated with team members who seem disengaged or difficult, this video is going to change how you see everything. If you don't know me, my name is Manya Chilinsky. I'm a survivor of the Boston Marathon bombing, and I delivered a TEDx talk that helped change how we think about invisible trauma, and I helped pass federal legislation to expand mental health support after disasters, all because my own city told me that my trauma didn't count because I walked away without a scratch on me. Today, I'm going to show you why your struggling employees are not disengaged. They are dysregulated. And once you understand the difference, you will never look at performance issues the same way again. Most leaders, if they think about it, think that disengagement and dysregulation are the same thing, but they are not. And confusing them costs you your best people. It costs you productivity and innovation. In this video, I'm going to break down 3 things. First, what's actually happening in a dysregulated person's nervous system? Second, why your performance improvement plans backfire? And third, 3 signs that your problem employee might actually be experiencing a trauma response. By the end of this video, you will understand why traditional management is broken and why the companies that figure this out will dominate in the next decade. Let's start with what disengagement actually is. A disengaged employee doesn't care. They've checked out mentally. They're doing the minimum to keep their job, and they're probably looking for some other opportunity. That is disengagement. Dysregulation, completely different. A dysregulated employee's nervous system is stuck in threat mode. Their brain thinks they are in danger, even when they're just sitting in a meeting. So let me explain to you what's happening biologically here. When someone experiences a trauma, it changes their brain and it changes how their nervous system works. Research shows that 2 out of 3 adults have experienced at least one adverse childhood experience: abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. And 1 in 6 adults have experienced 4 or more of these adverse experiences. We also know that roughly half of all adults will experience a trauma at some point in their life. The more adverse experiences someone has, the more their biology changes. It compromises immune systems, our stress response can get stuck on high alert, and the brain spends cognitive resources scanning for threats. And that's not a choice. This is biology. This is just what's happening. So when your employee seems withdrawn in meetings, they're not being difficult. Their nervous system might be in hypervigilance mode. If someone's asking too many questions, that's not necessarily a lack of confidence. It might be someone who's looking for safety by getting permission from you. When they miss deadlines, it's not poor time management. Maybe their executive function is impaired because of their stress response. It's not because they're not trying. It's not because they don't care. It's because their brain is busy keeping them alive. So what do most leaders do when they see these behaviors? Performance improvement plan. You document the issues, you set clear expectations, you schedule weekly check-ins, and then it doesn't work. And actually, oftentimes it makes things worse. And let me tell you why. Performance improvement plans are built on a faulty assumption. They assume that the employee knows how to do better and just somehow isn't trying. But if you're talking about a dysregulated employee, that is not what's happening. Their nervous system has learned, maybe early on, that the world isn't safe. Maybe they had a parent who was unpredictable. Maybe they experienced abuse. Maybe they survived a trauma as an adult. And you develop these survival strategies. And one of those is permission seeking. Someone asks a lot of questions because getting approval feels safer than making a decision on their own. And they check in constantly because they're trying really hard to avoid making a mistake. And from your perspective, it can seem like they lack initiative. But for them, it's because taking risks feels really dangerous. And when you put them on a performance plan, you're essentially telling them you're not safe here in this environment. You are confirming the thing they are most afraid of. And when that happens, the nervous system goes into even higher alert. They ask more questions. They might become more withdrawn. They might make more mistakes because their cognitive load just increased. So you escalate, you document more, you get more frustrated. They get more dysregulated. That's a permission-seeking death spiral. The employee is looking for safety through permission. The leader sees a lack of accountability. The leader takes away autonomy. The employee feels less safe. The trauma response intensifies, and their performance actually declines. And that cycle continues until somebody leaves, which is usually the employee, and you lose someone who could have been great. So how do you know if your problem employee is actually dysregulated, if this is what's really happening with them? There are 3 signs to look for. Number 1, their behavior changed suddenly. They used to be engaged and now they're withdrawn. Maybe they used to meet deadlines all the time and now they're struggling. They used to contribute in meetings and now they're silent. When someone goes from high performer to struggling, something happened to them. Maybe it was something at work, maybe it was something in their personal life, but their nervous system may have shifted into threat mode, and you're seeing the result. Sign number 2, they're overly apologetic or overly defensive. These can be trauma responses. When you're overly apologetic, that's known as fawning. That's a survival strategy where you try to keep everyone happy, and that's what makes you feel safe. Overly defensive is when someone's in fight mode. Their nervous system can perceive your feedback as an attack. So their response to you is the way they're defending themselves, even if it doesn't make sense. And none of this is about that person's character. It's about their nervous system. Sign number 3 is if they're struggling with things that seem really basic. They can't remember what you talked about yesterday. They have trouble making simple decisions. They seem unfocused or scattered. This is not incompetence. This is what happens when your brain is spending resources on detecting threats. There's less available for executive function and memory. And another thing to watch for, dysregulated employees often call in sick more frequently. They're not lazy. Trauma compromises a person's immune system. They might actually be getting sicker more often, or they're having days where they just can't function. If they come back and try to push through while they're feeling that way, that's presenteeism. Someone's physically there, but cognitively they are at less capacity. A lot of leadership experts will tell you that the solution is having more empathy or more emotional intelligence training or being more vulnerable. That's not wrong. Those things are important, but it's not enough. The real problem is that we're using management frameworks that were designed in the 1950s. They assumed a workforce that was neurotypical, that hadn't experienced trauma, and they worked in factories where you could measure productivity by counting the number of widgets somebody produced that day. Now, so many of us are managing knowledge workers, and so many of them have experienced a childhood trauma. Half of them will experience a trauma as adults. Many are neurodivergent, but we're still using that old playbook. That's like trying to run modern software on a computer from 1985. It's not going to work, or it's certainly not going to work the way that you want it to. What's really fascinating is that trauma survivors actually have a superpower. They notice things other people miss. They see patterns others don't. And they sense when something is wrong before anyone else does. I experienced this myself after the Boston Marathon bombing. I could walk into a room and immediately sense the emotional temperature. And I could tell when someone was struggling, even if they were hiding it. This isn't magic. It's because my nervous system was hypervigilant. And that same sensitivity that makes me dysregulated in unsafe environments makes me incredibly perceptive in safe ones. So when your high performer suddenly starts showing attitude problems, they might not be the problem. They might be the canary in the coal mine. They're sensing something toxic in your culture that others haven't noticed yet. So maybe instead of putting them on a performance plan, you ask them what they're sensing. Ask them what has changed and what they need. You might learn something that saves your entire team. Let me give you some numbers, and I think they're going to shock you. Ernst & Young found that 85% of employees say empathetic leadership increased productivity and innovation. And that same study also found something else. Fake empathy or perceived fake empathy erodes trust, and that can harm morale and performance. Your productivity drops, your innovation drops, and you know what that means. Your profits drop. You can't half-ass this. You either genuinely create safety or you don't. And your employees can tell the difference. There's another reason this matters in this moment right now. Artificial intelligence is changing what skills we value. AI can write reports, it can follow procedures, it can execute plans. But what it can't do is see patterns across disparate domains. It can't sense what's wrong in a culture. And it can't solve problems that have never been solved before. But you know who can? Neurodivergent people, trauma survivors, people whose brains develop differently because of their lived experiences. Some of the most brilliant innovators of the last 200 years were probably neurodivergent. You know what? In 10 years, companies that didn't build trauma-informed cultures will be obsolete. They will have optimized for the wrong type of human. So what do you actually do? I'm going to give you 3 things that you can start immediately. First, stop permission giving. When someone asks, what do you think? Maybe you respond with, well, what do you think? When they try to get your approval, redirect back to their own judgment. It's going to feel uncomfortable at first. They're going to push back and they're going to keep just asking you, tell me what you think. They're going to try again, but hold the line, because your role here is to break that cycle of permission seeking. And you're teaching them that it is safe for them to make decisions and that you trust them. Number 2, audit your environment. Is your office set up in a way that creates constant stress? Open offices are terrible for dysregulated people. You know what? They're pretty terrible for everybody else as well. We talked about moving from open offices to private spaces can actually increase cognitive output for everyone, not just trauma survivors. So maybe your office design is actually making your entire team dumber. Now, if you can't redesign your office space immediately, I get it. Start small. Maybe you give people noise-canceling headphones. Maybe you can create some quiet zones or let people work from home when they need to. Giving your employees control over their environment. That's what we're talking about here. And number 3, change how you give feedback. Stop asking the question, why didn't you do this? That triggers defensiveness in all of us, whatever your trauma history might be. But instead, ask, what's getting in your way? Or what support do you need? Or even, what are you sensing that's going on here that I'm not seeing? These questions show trust, they create safety, they show that you're curious and you're not judging someone. And that's how you start a real conversation. Let me tell you what's really at stake here. After the Boston Marathon bombing, the official number in the news was 264 people were physically injured. The city rallied around them. They got private victim compensation funds. They got included in memorials. They got support. Some disaster mental health estimates show that anywhere from 4 to 50 people may experience psychological effects for every 1 person who's injured. That means at a minimum, 1,056 people were psychologically injured that day. At maximum, over 13,000. And the city's response excluded almost all of us. The message was clear: your trauma doesn't count. And that very same thing happens in workplaces every single day. You see people who are visibly struggling. You see the ones who break down crying or who are obviously in crisis. But you miss the ones who are dysregulated. They show up every day and they push through. And they look fine on the outside, but their nervous system's screaming inside. Those are the people that you're losing, and you don't know why. Your struggling employee isn't your problem. Your system is. And the good news is that your system can be changed. You don't need to become a therapist. You don't need to know everyone's trauma history. You just need to create environments where nervous systems can regulate, where people feel safe enough to do their best work, where you recognize and support dysregulation rather than punish. The companies that figure this out will dominate. They'll access talent pools other people just can't. You'll get productivity boosts. They'll innovate faster. You'll win. The companies that don't are going to keep losing their best people. And they're going to keep wondering, why doesn't our performance plan work? And they're going to keep optimizing for a workforce that doesn't exist anymore. The choice is yours. If this video changed how you think about your team, there's more you need to know. I've got another video that breaks down exactly how to redesign your systems for trauma-informed leadership. It covers the specific changes that get results, the ones that turn dysregulated employees into your highest performers. Watch that one next. And if you're a leader who's serious about building a team that actually thrives, subscribe to this channel, because everything I teach is about creating workplaces where people can heal and perform at the same time. Not one or the other, both. That's the future, and it's closer than you think.